It began with the hush of a dying afternoon, the sky a tapestry of purple and gold. My name is Bryn, a so-called off-world mercenary, accustomed to stepping across cosmic frontiers, with the stale breath of unknown threats forever creeping at my back. I came to Tressa 7 with calloused hands and a battered moral code, seeking a place to lie low from those who would hunt me for deeds I never dared question. Yet I found more than a hideout among the jagged rocks and red deserts of this remote planet. I discovered an unlikely companion, a wolf-like being who would stand at my side in both life and war, a presence as fierce as the howling wind of Tressa's savage nights. No one told me Tressa 7 was home to the Saran clans, a proud, ancient people who lived in carefully tended enclaves of labyrinthine huts, forming tight bonds and abiding by archaic traditions. They rarely welcomed outsiders, but neither were they openly hostile, so long as one spoke not a word to inflame their old ways. The starport official, lazy and half-blind, merely waved me through. He had long since given up trying to organize the flow of fugitives, wanderers, and thieves who drifted across this world like dust devils. I followed rumor and ragged star charts to a forlorn settlement on the edges of Tressa's principal desert, a place known among rogues and outcasts as the Third Rill. There, under a cracking dome, I found rickety wooden structures hugging the remains of a small oasis. The rumor was that fewer questions would be asked. Indeed, no one seemed too curious when I stepped across the threshold of a creaking tavern, my boots coated in rust-colored sands. I was but one more stranger drifting in from the dunes. In that dingy tavern, my tale truly commenced. For it was there I saw Niora, perched in a shadowed corner like a sentinel, her golden eyes luminous as heated embers. Her form was humanoid, yet undeniably wolfish, with dark fur marking her brow and trailing down her powerful arms. Her ears, upright and tapered, twitched at each echo of laughter or sudden movement. She wore what passed for an off-world traveler's suit, adapted to fit her lithe, tall frame. The alien comfort of her appearance did not unsettle me, for I had known a multitude of species in my wanderings. But something in her calm, assured posture drew my attention, as if an invisible tether strung us together in that smoky half-light. When I ordered a drink from the barkeep and found a seat, I observed the entire clientele, spacers, criminals, desperate colonists, yes, and wolves as well. For that was the nature of Tressa 7. It was shared by humans and the Saran, shaped by precarious alliances or grudging truces between the off-worlders and the planet's original clans. Niora, as I later learned, was from one such clan. She had come to the settlement to trade, to gather supplies, and perhaps to glean knowledge of the outsiders who had begun settling deeper inland, encroaching upon clan territory. She and I exchanged glances across the room that first day, but not a word passed between us. Even so, I felt that the meeting of our gazes spoke volumes. When she finally slipped out the door, disappearing into the hush of the vast desert twilight, it struck me that perhaps my course was about to change. Days slipped by. I spent them repairing bits of my battered star sled. I had no interest in leaving Tressa 7, at least not yet. The settlement's quiet lawlessness suited me, and I found a certain companionship in its outcasts. In the evenings, I occasionally returned to that tavern, nursing an unremarkable drink in the same corner, and always, in time, Niora arrived. Sometimes she was alone, sometimes with others of her kin, tall, wolf-like figures with fierce eyes and strong jaws. They were armed, always, with blades at their belts, as though expecting trouble at the slightest gesture. I made a point not to stare too long, but curiosity got the better of me. Perhaps the sparks of fate had begun kindling. Perhaps I simply grew bored. Whatever the reason, one evening, I approached. There were 3 of them that night: Niora, a rugged Saran with grizzled fur at his muzzle, and a slender female with vivid stripes along her arms. No sooner had I come within earshot than the grizzled one's ears flattened in aggression, a rumbling growl emanating from his throat. The slender female also seemed tense, half rising to intercept me. Niora's eyes flicked to me, and with a quiet command in their language raw-edged syllables that rumbled in the back of her throat, she calmed them. She was uncertain, I could see, yet curious enough. I bowed slightly. The gesture humans often made among the Saran, a sign of respect. The corner of her lip curled in a half-smile. We introduced ourselves in halting speech, she in her clipped, accented basic, and I in the few Saran phrases I had gleaned from the barkeep. A hesitant conversation emerged. She asked questions about off-world life. I told her only what I felt safe revealing, that I was a warrior, or mercenary, who had grown tired of fighting meaningless conflicts on far-flung planets, that I was searching for a semblance of peace. She seemed thoughtful as she listened, occasionally nodding, her golden eyes unwavering. By night's end, the tension in her companions had eased. Niora walked me to the tavern door, her posture indicative of cautious trust. The next evening, she came alone. We shared a meal of dried meat and stale bread, along with a briny drink that locals claimed was distilled from desert cacti. In the flickering lamplight, her fur glistened, the subtle color of a deeper midnight than I had first realized. She spoke more freely of her clan, one of the many that roamed Tressa 77's red plains and craggy highlands. The Sarans had once warred among themselves, but these days their conflicts were overshadowed by the presence of off-world settlers. She disliked how the new arrivals took land, extracted minerals, and left scars upon Tressa's fragile ecosystem. Nevertheless, she held no blind hatred for other species. She recognized that times were changing, that not all outsiders sought to conquer. There was a fragility in her voice as she spoke, a subtle heartbreak for what might be lost. An unlikely friendship sparked that night, forged in the desert gloom. I found myself listening intently to her stories about hunting in the star-silvered dunes, or traveling across the Ivorian plateau, where strange crystal spires hummed with energy. She recounted clan rituals performed under Tressa's twin moons, Sira and Ciro, describing how the Saran believed those moons once guided their ancestors from the stars. Strangely, though we hailed from different worlds, we understood each other. We shared a sense of displacement, of being on the outskirts of a society that might never fully accept us. Over the following weeks, we met more often, exploring the edges of the settlement together, or exchanging news about the shifting situation between the clans and off-worlders. Her ease and confidence in my presence brought forth something in me I had long buried, genuine empathy. The cold mercenary shell I wore for so many years began to crack. Our bond, however, did not go unnoticed. Whispers arose. In many Saran clans, there was an ingrained suspicion of intimate ties between their people and humans, especially a mercenary like me, with a past stained by violent engagements. More than once, I found hateful eyes following me through the settlement's narrow lanes. Some were Saran. Others were humans who harbored bigotry for the planet's original inhabitants. Though the barkeep maintained a neutral stance, he warned me of rumors that certain clan leaders, old-school traditionalists, despised any mingling between us. They saw it as an affront to their cultural purity, a threat to their control. Yet none of that deterred me from seeking Niora's company. By then, the mere notion of her presence brought a warmth to my chest, a subtle, pulsing ache of something akin to joy in a life that had otherwise been a bleak trudge from one battlefield to the next. Perhaps, too, she felt a similar gravitational pull, for she would wait for me in the tavern after my errands, beckoning me over with a gentle wave of her clawed hand. One evening, beneath a star-choked sky, we ventured beyond the settlement's perimeter and into the open desert. With her keen Saran senses, Niora guided us to a rocky outcropping half buried in the sands. There we sat, side by side, gazing upon a horizon bright with the milky spiral, the galaxy's shimmering river of light. Tressa's twin moons, Sira and Ciro, hung low in the heavens, painting the world in argent luminescence. For a spell, neither of us spoke, content to dwell in that perfect hush. Then, in a voice huskier than usual, she confided that certain elders of her clan demanded that she return and break all contact with me. The rumors of our closeness had traveled swiftly across Tressa's dunes, carried by clan scouts and watchful eyes. Despite the ultimatum, she remained there at my side. With a trembling exhalation, she turned to me. Her luminous eyes, large and deeply set, reflected the starlight. She reached out, her clawed fingers tentative against my own. I clasped her hand. A rush of acceptance, of belonging, flooded me in that moment. For so long I had walked alone, carrying burdens no one cared to share. Now, an alien wolf woman offered me an anchor in a swirling tide of uncertainties. Something in my spirit awakened. The old, jaded soldier receded, replaced by an unflinching vow to protect what we had discovered, even if it meant facing the might of her clan or the cruelty of men. Quietly, our foreheads touched, a gesture of closeness among her people. The night wind carried the hushed promise that we would stand together. But Tressa 7 is a crucible of conflict, and soon our fragile happiness was threatened. The settlement of outcasts, where I had found refuge, known simply as the Fringe by many, sat precariously between two larger Saran enclaves. Word arrived that a newly emboldened sect of fanatic clansmen, called the Zathra, viewed any alliance between a Saran and off-worlder as an unholy blight. They were rumored to stage night raids on those who dared defy them, particularly if they believed a Saran had taken a human mate. And so it came to pass that we heard warnings from travelers of a roving warband creeping ever closer. Whether these Zathra served some ancient dogma or simply thirsted for blood, I could not say. But their threat was undeniable. The local settlers, ragtag as we were, could not afford to ignore them. A meeting of the settlement's leaders was called in the old storage hall, a rundown structure with walls half-eaten by rust, dozens crammed inside humans, Sarans, and hybrids from far-flung worlds. It was the first time I saw so many in a single place. Their anxious murmurs and uncertain glances testified to their fear. Niora stood near me, watchful. Her eyes flickered across the gathering, sizing up who might stand with us if the settlement was attacked. I recognized the barkeep, who had once been a soldier himself. There was a tall, broad-shouldered man named Garth, the closest thing the Fringe had to a sheriff. I also spotted a few cluster farmers and a handful of older Saran whose muzzles grayed with age. Their ears swiveled nervously at every sound. When Garth called for order, the hall quieted, though tension still crackled in the air. He relayed the intelligence. A warband of the Zathra, numbering anywhere from 30 to 50 warriors, was making its way southward. They carried rifles, ballistic blades, and an uncanny desire to purge all that they deemed impure. Once they learned of me and Niora, or any outcast alliances that mixed blood, they would not hesitate to strike. The settlement's defenses consisted of a low wooden wall, some salvage from crashed starships, and a scattering of half-functional guns, scarcely enough to repel a determined assault. Whispers sprang up. Some residents argued that it was too dangerous to stay. Better to flee, they said, to vanish into the dunes. Others insisted they had nowhere else to go, that everything they owned was here, meager though it was. The old Saran in attendance glowered at talk of retreat. Abandoning the settlement would confirm the Zathra's claims that cross-species alliances were weak. It was Niora who first voiced a clearer path. She reminded everyone that the settlement may appear pitiful, but it had natural advantages: a perimeter of rocky ridges, pockets of sharpened cacti, and narrow choke points through which only small squads could pass. If they prepared defenses with cunning, they could whittle down the attackers. She also suggested sending word to other clans less fanatical than the Zathra, clans that might quietly aid us. Not all Sarans followed the old ways of hatred, and many might rally against zealots who threatened Tressa's delicate balance. Her speech was met with cautious approval, though a few among the crowd cast suspicious glares in our direction. No one openly challenged her, however, for they sensed that such a plan was their best hope. Garth and the barkeep stepped forward to coordinate, and so began our efforts to fortify the settlement for war. For the next few days, the settlement hummed with frantic energy. Gatherers stockpiled water, dried foods, and medical supplies from the modest clinic. Blacksmiths hammered scraps of metal into armor plating for barricades. Skilled marksmen practiced at the edges of the settlement, calibrating old laser rifles and slug throwers. The Saran among us contributed their expertise in stealth and melee tactics, teaching the humans how to quietly roam Tressa's dunes, or how to read subtle shifts in the wind that might signify an approaching party. Niora, a seasoned huntress, scouted frequently. She was out for hours at a time, crouching behind rock formations and scanning the horizon for signs of movement. Despite my concern for her safety, I did not try to stop her. She was an expert in Tressa's harsh environment, far more adept at moving undetected than I was. Whenever she returned to the settlement, panting slightly, she would pull me aside, describing what she saw: footprints too large for typical travelers, dried patches of blood on the sand, or broken cacti that indicated the path of the Zathra's columns. Day by day, they drew nearer. My role became that of an organizer and instructor. Having fought in countless mercenary campaigns, I knew the value of strategic positioning, the advantage of flanking maneuvers, and the necessity of fallback lines. Garth proved a quick study. He had a soldier's discipline, and his leadership gave the outcasts some semblance of unity. The barkeep, though older, was a crack shot with his antique rifle and offered pointers to any who would listen. At night, I oversaw the building of spiked barricades out of scavenged hull plating, old wooden beams, and hammered scrap. We placed them at the two main entrance roads and at every vulnerability in the settlement's perimeter. We also prepared a fallback plan if the settlement's outer ring was breached. We would retreat to a secondary position behind a narrow crevasse on the western side, where archers, riflemen, and Saran spear throwers could funnel the attackers into a kill zone. It was a grim plan, but war is never a cheerful affair. Throughout it all, Niora stood with me, her presence a calm center amid the storm of fear. Her gaze affirmed that we had chosen this path together, that we would stand or fall as one. Meanwhile, rumors abounded that certain members of Niora's home clan had grown incensed at her alliance with a human. Some demanded her return, claiming the war with the Zathra was none of her concern, that she was throwing her life away for a cause not her own, and for a man who had no rightful place among the Saran. Others threatened dire consequences for her and me, but none of these threats ever materialized into direct confrontation. We suspected they bided their time, watching to see how events unfolded. Perhaps they were torn between loyalty to their own traditions and the knowledge that a victory for the Zathra would eventually threaten all Sarans. On the eve of battle, an uneasy hush settled upon the fringe. Torches flickered along the barricades, and the wind moaned through gaps in the makeshift walls. My nerves tightened at every rustle of movement. The small militia we had formed, a ragtag band of humans and Sarans, took their positions. Niora was with a scouting party hidden among rocks just beyond the settlement, prepared to ambush any forward scouts the Zathra might send. My heart pounded at the thought of her in the line of danger, but I knew her capabilities. I had to trust in that. No moon shone that night. Sira and Ciro had both dipped below the horizon. Clouds shrouded the stars. Darkness reigned. Many of us could scarcely see beyond a few paces. The settlement was silent, save for the soft shuffle of boots on sand, the quiet breathing of determined men, women, and wolves. And then came the thunder of approach. The Zathra were here. They did not come in subtlety. Their war cries rumbled over the desert, a deep, guttural howl that made the ground tremble. Through the gloom, I glimpsed silhouettes surging forward, tall forms with rifles raised, swords glinting. Some bore torches, revealing muzzles twisted in savage snarls. At least 3 dozen, by my rough estimate. Maybe more. Their leader, a massive Saran draped in spiked armor, roared commands in a dialect thick and archaic. It was a war chant of condemnation. How dare we unite Saran in human blood? We stood firm. Garth gave the order, and muzzle flashes lit the night as our defenders opened fire. The stench of smoke and plasma seared the air. Some Zathra fell in the first volley. Others stumbled or cursed, but many pressed on, leaping over the sharpened barricades or blasting them aside with improvised explosives. Chaos erupted. The barkeep fired from atop a wooden watchtower, picking off attackers who thought to scale the settlement walls. Shrieks of pain joined the roar of gunfire. I led a squad that rushed to defend the eastern barricade, where the breach was greatest. We faced Zathra brandishing curved swords and ballistic shotguns. I fought with my assault rifle, each shot guided by muscle memory. My bullets dropped 2, then 3 of the invaders. But they were relentless, pushing forward even as their comrades fell. One lunged at me with a spiked club, snarling in my face. I parried with the butt of my rifle, then finished him with a close-range burst. Sweat and sand stung my eyes. Some defenders were overwhelmed in seconds, their screams cut short by the slash of a Zathra blade, the clash of steel against steel, the thunder of archaic firearms, the blasts of energy rifles all merged into a single cacophony. Over the fray, I listened for Niora's voice, prayed to hear her call. I caught a glimpse of dark fur darting among the shadows, an agile silhouette pouncing upon an invader from behind. She fought with fluid grace, her claws raking at vital points, her muzzle twisted in concentration. Relief and renewed vigor coursed through me. She was here, fighting by my side. The defensive line began to waver under the sheer weight of numbers. Shouts echoed, fall back to the second perimeter." We scrambled to obey, dragging our wounded from the blood-soaked ground. The barkeep hopped down from the watchtower, cursing at the jam in his rifle. Garth directed us toward the western crevasse. I glimpsed the silhouettes of the Zathra bounding over shattered barricades, triumphant howls rising. The settlement was partially ablaze, structures burning bright orange in the night. We retreated in haste, forming a second line behind the natural choke point of rock. Torches glowed on the opposite side, revealing the group of attackers massing for a final push. I swallowed down my own terror. So many times I had been in hopeless fights, clinging to the barest thread of survival. Yet never had I fought for something I truly cared about. Now, at least, I fought for her, for the union that defied the old hatreds. As the Zathra advanced, we unleashed a volley of gunfire and arrows from the higher ridge. Several of them tumbled, wounded or dead. Others crouched behind scraps of metal for cover, trading shots that ricocheted off the rocks near us. Time blurred into a frantic haze of muzzle flashes, pounding heartbeats, and the acrid scent of scorched sand. In the chaos, a group of Zathra flankers tried to climb a rocky outcrop to our left. Niora noticed them first, flinging a spear that impaled one to the stone. She barked a warning, and I shifted my rifle to that position. We rained fire on them, driving them back, but more kept coming. Suddenly, from the desert's dim expanse, howls of another kind echoed. A new wave of shapes emerged under the flicker of distant flames. At first I feared reinforcements for the Zathra, but then I noticed their banners the crest of a rival Saran clan. They had arrived, perhaps heeding our request for aid, or maybe compelled by their own loathing for the Zathra's fanaticism. In fluid strides, they charged into the rear of the attackers, savage roars merging with the whir of plasma staff weapons. Caught between two forces, the Zathra found themselves pressed on both sides. Their leader bellowed commands for regrouping, but it was too late. The allied clan hammered into their flank, slashing with curved blades, short-range energy whips crackling across the darkness. The Zathra had no choice but to split their attention, and that was all the opportunity we needed. Garth gave the order, and we advanced, retaking lost ground with a determined push. The final clash was brief yet brutal. Bodies littered the sandy earth, a mixture of friend and foe. Smoke billowed from burning huts. Still, we pressed forward, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. A shot cracked near my ear, clipping my shoulder and sending a flash of pain down my arm. I dropped to a knee, vision spinning. A savage snarl tore from behind as a Zathra soldier closed in, blade raised to finish me. But then Niora crashed into him, driving her claws deep into his chest. He collapsed with a strangled cry. She knelt by my side, her eyes wild with worry, and lifted me to my feet. The rest of the Zathra, seeing their leader cut down by a spear through the back, lost their remaining resolve. They fled or were cut down in the attempt. Thus the night's onslaught ended with a final hush of despairing howls. Silence reigned, broken only by the crackle of flames. Garth and the other defenders moved about with trembling steps, checking for survivors, offering what first aid they could. The allied clan that arrived in the nick of time surveyed the carnage with grim acceptance. Our victory, if it could be called that, had come at a heavy cost. The settlement was scarred. Dozens lay injured or dead. Smoke filled the air. Yet we had defied the Zathra, and in so doing, we had proven that an alliance between man and wolfkind was not a weakness. We had stood, together, against fanatic terror. Niora's clan kinsfolk arrived by dawn, uncertain whether to chastise her or offer her praise. Some of the older ones tried to look indifferent, but their eyes betrayed astonishment at what she and I had done. Rumors swelled that the Zathra had finally met a devastating blow, and that other clans might soon unite under a banner of tolerance, if only to prevent such fanatic uprisings from happening again. In the weeks that followed, the settlement labored to rebuild. Survivors salvaged materials from the wreckage, patching up huts and domes. A few left, unwilling to endure another such attack, but many remained, stoic in the face of adversity. We began forging new relationships with the allied clan that had come to our aid, establishing trade and mutual defense pacts. Though suspicion lingered in some corners, the stigma around cross-species alliances had been weakened by our victory. Niora stood at the forefront of this fragile new era. Whether or not her clan's elders would formally recognize her bond with me, they could not deny the practical benefits we had brought by standing together. She and I made no apologies for our closeness, nor did we flaunt it. We merely lived as any two people might when bound by affection and respect, and so I found a strange and unfamiliar joy in the tasks of daily life, helping repair the settlement's water systems, training eager novices in the art of self-defense, and, late in the evening, sharing quiet moments with Niora, basking in a subtle peace I had never known. Sometimes we would trek into the desert with a small group to gather cacti, or examine the rock formations that concealed water pockets. She taught me more of the Saran language, and I taught her the old soldier songs I once hummed in lonely corners of the galaxy. To say that all was perfect would be a lie. Ancient prejudices do not vanish overnight. We encountered plenty of grumbling, dismissive stares, and gossip from both sides. Some humans muttered that I had fallen under the wolf woman's spell, that it was unnatural. Some Sarans hissed that Niora was betraying her bloodline. But each day that passed saw a slight lessening of hostility. With the Zathra scattered, fewer were willing to wage open conflict just to protest our union. In time, a semblance of normality returned to the fringe. I found employment as a security advisor. Niora roamed between her clan's territory and the settlement, guiding caravans through treacherous desert routes and sharing her knowledge of the land. She became the link that bridged cultural divides, her presence emblematic of a new possibility, that the old animosity between species might be mended, or at least softened, by mutual necessity and the gentle sparks of empathy. Yet trouble brewed again, not in the form of a war band, but as a more insidious threat. An off-world corporation, Triaris Consolidated, had set its sights on Tressa 7, lured by rumors of rare minerals beneath the red sands. They arrived in sleek ships bearing the corporate logo, claiming to hold official charters and mining rights granted by distant bureaucrats. Many of us knew how such corporations operated. They would strip the land, exploit cheap labor, and discard the locals once the resources were bled dry. The fact that Tressa's environment was fragile, that its people human and Saran depended on the precarious balance of desert ecosystems, mattered little to Triaris's profit-driven machine. When corporate representatives landed at the fringe, their crisp uniforms and polished boots sharply contrasted with our dust-caked attire. They were accompanied by private security forces, all well armed. I felt a stab of caution. These men and women had the backing of interstellar law, or at least the version of it that catered to the highest bidder. And if they established a major mining operation here, the tenuous peace we had fought for could unravel. The Saran, particularly more traditional clans, would not take kindly to having their ancestral lands ravaged. At first, Triaris approached Garth and the Settlement Council, offering deals for local labor, promising technology upgrades, improved housing, and expanded trade opportunities. The terms seemed appealing on the surface, but the fine print revealed exploitation and near total control of water resources. One clan elder, who studied the contract, barked in anger, declaring that no Saran in their right mind would accept such terms. Meanwhile, rumors claimed Triaris had approached certain unscrupulous factions of the Saran, offering them arms and wealth in exchange for cooperation, or at least for not opposing the corporation's operations. This fracture among the Saran worried me more than any direct assault. A people divided would be easy prey. Niora's face darkened each time Triaris was mentioned. She confided that some in her clan, seeing an opportunity for power, were tempted by the corporation's enticements. Others argued that the Zathra's defeat had left a power vacuum that Triaris might fill. If the clans did not unite, Triaris would soon wield uncontested influence over Tressa 7. Determined not to let that happen, we joined a small delegation to meet Triaris's corporate head, a man named Darius Pell. He was a tall, imposing figure with silver hair slicked back, his eyes like chips of obsidian, polite enough on the surface, but there was a chill in his smile. He welcomed us into his temporary office, an inflated dome structure parked on the outskirts of the settlement. Over a table of holographic projections, he showed us what he deemed the future of Tressa: large-scale mining complexes, advanced drilling machines, a spaceport expansion to facilitate shipping. The images portrayed prosperity, but I noticed that all references to local cultures were absent, as though the Saran people were no more significant than the cacti that littered the desert. When we raised concerns about the environment and the potential dislocation of the Saran from their ancestral grounds, Pell sighed, feigning regret. He explained that progress sometimes demanded hard choices. He assured us that Triaris would do its best to preserve local traditions, so long as they did not interfere with production. Then, with a cryptic smile, he offered me a personal deal. He had heard of my martial prowess and suggested I join Triaris's security forces as an advisor. The pay, he promised, would be generous, enough to free me from my meager existence in the fringe. I refused him flatly, an edge in my voice that left no room for negotiation. The tension in the room thickened. Before we departed, Pell turned to Niora. "You, my dear," he said with calculated smoothness, "are something of a legend now, are you not? A clan huntress who took a human mate, and together you repelled a fanatic invasion. Admirable. Perhaps you should consider how much good you could do for Tressa if you worked with us, instead of against us." Her answer was a low, rumbling growl that needed no translation. Triaris wasted no time solidifying its presence. Within weeks, cargo ships landed, unloading drilling rigs, prefab barracks, and squads of corporate security. Tensions soared among the clans. Some younger Saran, lured by wages and promised wealth, enlisted as laborers for Triaris. Others planned to sabotage the corporation's expansion. The settlement was caught in the middle, uncertain whether to protest or to glean what benefits might be gained. Niora and I, along with Garth and the barkeep, helped form a committee dedicated to protecting the settlement's interests and mediating with local clans. The allied clan that had aided us against the Zathra pledged to stand firm against Triaris, but they were not large in number. Niora sought an audience with her own clan elders, urging them to rally the clans in defense of Tressa. After much debate, they agreed to convene a rare gathering of clan leaders under the old traditions, known as the Jurtath Assembly. If the clans emerged united from this assembly, Triaris might face too great a resistance to continue its operations. We traveled across scorching deserts and rugged plateaus to reach the meeting site. Deep in the heart of Saran territory, it was an ancient place, a circular clearing, surrounded by towering stone monoliths, etched with swirling patterns. According to legend, the ancestors of the Saran had once landed there from a star-faring vessel centuries ago. Now, clan leaders from every corner of Tressa 7 assembled beneath the monoliths, proud matriarchs, wizened elders, and formidable war chiefs. Their eyes watched us warily as we entered, for many recognized me, the human who had claimed the heart of one of their own. It was a tense proceeding from the start. Some clans demanded immediate war against Triaris, urging sabotage and open conflict. Others argued for caution, for negotiations. A few advocated isolation, insisting that if the Saran retreated to their ancestral strongholds, Triaris would lose interest in those barren tracts. Niora spoke passionately, urging unity, warning that Triaris would not be so easily thwarted. If the clans scattered, Triaris would pick them off or bribe them, fracturing Saran solidarity. She also argued that cooperation with off-worlders could be beneficial if done on the Saran's own terms, not forced upon them by Triaris's exploitative schemes. Her speech sparked an uproar. Some clan leaders roared that no Saran should speak of cooperation with humans after centuries of oppression. Others pointed out that Niora had proven the value of forging alliances. The argument grew heated. I stood back, letting her words speak for themselves. This was her people's decision. All the while, the massive monoliths seemed to loom, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. At length, an elder named Fares white fur along his muzzle. Eyes like cloudy rubies commanded silence. He was revered among the Saran for his wisdom and impartial stance. In a voice that trembled with age yet resonated with authority, he declared that a divided Saran people would mean the end of Tressa 7-7's cultural heritage. Triaris would carve up the land, cut deals with unscrupulous clan factions, and shatter their ancient traditions. Only by standing as one, by forging alliances even with certain off-worlders, could they maintain their sovereignty. Lest we repeat the endless clan wars of old, he cautioned, we must not allow a foreign force to dictate our future. Though murmurs of dissent echoed, the weight of Fares's words was undeniable. Slowly, the clan leaders bowed their heads in grudging acceptance. A formal alliance was declared. Any clan refusing to honor the Assembly's resolution would be cast out as traitors to the Saran. A coalition council was formed to coordinate strategies, negotiations with Triaris if possible, and, if necessary, armed resistance to protect Tressa's environment and people. By the Assembly's end, Niora and I stood under the towering monoliths, a sense of renewed hope pulsing through us. For the first time, we saw a pathway for Tressa that did not end in corporate enslavement or clan warfare. But we knew the road ahead was fraught with peril. Triaris would not abandon its profitable enterprise willingly, and subtle sabotage or bribery might still unravel the unity we had achieved. Back at the settlement, a new tension crackled in the air. Triaris had learned of the Jurtath assembly and was not pleased. Their security forces now patrolled the desert in armored transports, setting up checkpoints. They stopped caravans, questioning travelers, sometimes confiscating goods under the pretext of searching for contraband. Garth, furious, confronted them about their brazen attempts to control local trade. Pell brushed him off, citing corporate policy. As the allied clans began to coordinate with each other, Triaris ramped up its operations, expanding deeper into Saran territory. Reports trickled in of drilling sites being established near the Ivorian Plateau, a place sacred to many clans for its crystalline spires. The barkeep muttered that Triaris was pushing deliberately, hoping to provoke some clans into a reckless attack that would justify a large-scale corporate crackdown. Under the banner of the new coalition, Niora and I traveled from settlement to settlement, urging caution and unity. We spoke with clan representatives, shared news of the fringe's small successes in forging alliances, and attempted to dissuade them from launching premature strikes against Triaris. Nevertheless, tensions mounted to a boiling point. One evening, word came that a group of young Saran warriors, fed up with corporate checkpoints, had ambushed a Triaris convoy, killing several security officers. Triaris responded by sending gunships to bomb the Saran's suspected hideout, igniting a raging fire in the desert that scorched hundreds of acres. War seemed inevitable. The only question was whether we could limit its scope and preserve the fragile alliances that promised Tressa 7 a better future. Garth, the barkeep, and I formulated a plan with coalition leaders. A direct confrontation with Triaris's main base might be too costly, but if we could sabotage their supply lines and expose their exploitation to galactic authorities, we might force Triaris to negotiate or withdraw. A small infiltration team was assembled consisting of me, Niora, 2 stealthy Saran scouts, and a former Triaris employee who had turned whistleblower. The whistleblower claimed that Triaris had no legitimate charter and had falsified documents to gain a foothold. If we could access their central data hub, we could copy incriminating files and broadcast them to an off-world network. That evidence, combined with pressure from the newly united Saran clans, might compel the corporation to stand down. Under cover of darkness, we set out across the desert in an old 6-wheeled transport. The plan was dangerous. Triaris's base was fortified, patrolled by advanced security drones and watchtowers. Still, we had the advantage of stealth and local knowledge. Niora and the Saran scouts could move almost soundlessly across the sands, using the landscape's natural contours for cover. Our whistleblower carried key codes that might bypass certain perimeter systems if they still worked. We arrived on the outskirts of the base, crouched behind dunes lit only by the faint starlight. The structures were arranged in orderly rows: prefab bunkers, supply warehouses, drilling rigs, and the command center. Floodlights swept across a perimeter fence. Security drones hummed overhead, scanning for heat signatures. Slowly, patiently, we inched forward, taking advantage of every blind spot. A hush of adrenaline pressed upon me. It took an hour to breach the perimeter fence, cutting power to a small section of the security grid. We slipped inside, hearts pounding, and made our way to the eastern side of the command building. There we found a locked hatch. The whistleblower keyed in a code, and, to our relief, a green light flashed. We entered a dim corridor, the sterile hum of ventilation systems loud in our ears. Crouching behind crates, we navigated toward the data hub. Twice, patrols nearly spotted us, beams of flashlights dancing across the walls. My pulse roared in my ears. At last we reached our objective, a sealed room labeled Operations Control. The whistleblower's code no longer worked, prompting an alarm beep. Tension spiked. One of the Saran scouts quickly used a hacking device, purchased off-world, that forced the door open with a hiss. No sooner had we stepped inside than a security alarm blared, bathing the corridor in red emergency lights. We locked the door behind us. Niora guarded it while I and the others searched the terminals for the incriminating data. The whistleblower plugged in a storage device, frantically tapping at the console. Outside, we heard shouts and the thud of boots. The door rattled. Distantly, a muffled voice demanded we open up. Seconds dragged like hours. My heart hammered, sweat rolling down my temples. Niora raised her rifle, bracing it at the door. At last, the whistleblower exclaimed, "Got it," and yanked the storage device free. We rushed to find an alternate exit, but the only other door led to a locked utility corridor. Another quick hack opened it. We dashed through, hearing the main door crash behind us as security forced it. Shouts rang out, pulses of gunfire ricocheting, navigating half-lit corridors. We sprinted for the outside, red lights strobed, alarms wailing. By fortune or cunning, we managed to avoid direct confrontation, sliding into a shadowed storage bay that led to the outer yard. We slipped through cargo containers and supply crates. A searchlight swept overhead. My lungs burned, but I forced myself forward. At the perimeter fence, We spotted a patrol headed straight for us. Niora motioned for silence, flattening herself against the sand, dark fur blending with the shadows. The rest of us did the same. We waited, hearts pounding, as the patrol passed mere feet from our hiding spot. Once they were gone, we made a break for the fence, crossing through the same section we had cut earlier. Lights flashed behind us. Shouts of discovery resounded. We leaped into the desert, half running, half crawling up a ridge of sand. Gunshots whizzed overhead. By some miracle, none of us were hit. Reaching our transport, we piled in. The engine roared to life. I floored the accelerator, sending us careening into the night, corporate searchlights still probing the darkness behind us. We pressed on until dawn cast pale light across Tressa's horizon. We had the data. Now we needed to broadcast it. Back at the settlement, Garth had prepared a makeshift communications array cobbled together from old starship parts and an enhanced signal booster. The whistleblower worked feverishly to decrypt the data, discovering proof of Triaris's fraudulent contracts, their illegal splicing of planetary registry codes, and logs detailing their intention to forcibly relocate entire Saran clans if it improved mining yields. There was enough evidence to incite an interstellar outcry, if we could get it to the right channels. Despite Triaris's attempts at jamming signals, our broadcast squeaked through a narrow band. We sent the data to an off-world advocacy group known to champion indigenous rights. Then we waited, uncertain how quickly any response might come, if at all. Triaris, realizing the breach, struck back immediately. Their private forces launched raids on suspected coalition enclaves, seeking to capture or kill the infiltration team us. The settlement braced for retaliation, but the Saran clans, now united, retaliated en masse, harrying Triaris convoys across the desert, staging coordinated ambushes. Within days, Triaris's supply lines were severely compromised. Without new shipments of fuel, their mining rigs ground to a halt. Amid the rising conflict, a message arrived via subspace relay. A coalition of interstellar organizations had seen the transmitted data and declared Triaris in violation of multiple treaties. They dispatched an investigative envoy to Tressa 7, fearing legal repercussions and possibly a wider confrontation. Triaris's board of directors ordered a partial withdrawal, at least until the dust settled. Pell attempted one final maneuver, threatening to sabotage Tressa's environment out of spite. He ordered his troops to rig the main drilling site with explosives, intending to collapse the cavernous subsurface, releasing toxic chemicals into the water table. If the Saran would not allow Triaris's presence, he vowed, then Tressa 7 would pay a terrible price. It fell to us, me, Niora, Garth, the barkeep, and a few clan warriors to stop this final act of destruction. In a swift assault, we stormed the drilling site, battling desperate Triaris security in a pitched firefight. Explosions rocked the scaffolding overhead as stray bullets ignited pockets of stored fuel. Niora led the charge, bounding between metal catwalks, disabling bombs with agile claws and swift engineering tools she barely understood, but manipulated with determined focus. I covered her with suppressive fire, uniting once more in that deadly waltz of survival. In the end, Pell, cornered and wounded, tried to detonate the charges remotely. The barkeep tackled him, wresting the detonator away. Pell cursed us all, spitting venomous threats until the barkeep's well-placed punch silenced him. The bombs were disarmed. The day was ours, with Triaris defeated, their forces retreating off-world in disgrace. Tressa 7 breathed a collective sigh of relief. The interstellar envoy arrived soon after, investigating the planet's condition and verifying the coalition's claims. Formal charges were leveled against Triaris's leadership, leading to protracted legal battles that would linger for years. Yet for Tressa, the immediate danger had passed. In the aftermath, the Saran clans ratified a new accord, pledging to stand together against any external threat and to maintain cautious but respectful relations with off-worlders. The settlement, once scorned as a den of outcasts, became a symbol of resilience and unity. Merchants and travelers began to arrive, drawn by rumors of Tressa's remarkable victory against a powerful corporation and by the strange, uplifting tale of a mercenary and a wolf woman who had bridged worlds. For Niora and me, life continued in a quieter rhythm, though our bond was now recognized, even celebrated by many who saw in it a promise that Tressa's future might accommodate both tradition and change. We built a modest dwelling on the outskirts of the settlement, part hut, part refurbished starship module, shaped by both human and Saran aesthetics. There, at dusk, we would sit and watch Tressa's twin moons rise over the desert, content with the knowledge that we had found a home in each other. Sometimes, older Sarans visited, curious about our life. Niora told them stories of the battles we had fought, the friendships forged. I recounted my own past as a mercenary, the regrets I harbored, and the redemption I found in defending this land. Though not all hearts were won, the seeds of understanding had been planted from across the dunes. I often glimpsed new caravans arriving, drawn by trade prospects or a desire to see the famed place where adversity had become camaraderie. The sound of distant laughter and clinking tools testified that rebuilding efforts thrived. Children, both human and Saran, played in the dusty streets, their laughter echoing with an unburdened innocence that gave me hope. They would grow up in a Tressa far more united than the one we had inherited. Perhaps their generation would see beyond the differences of fur and skin, forging a truly shared destiny on this harsh but beautiful world. Time drifted on, measured in the waxing and waning of Tressa's twin moons, in the shifting sands that sometimes buried old battlefields and old hatreds alike. Each dawn brought a renewed hush of possibility, and though the scars of conflict lingered, etched into hearts and landscapes, we had chosen a path that led toward healing rather than further ruin. For my part, I had been many things: soldier, renegade, fugitive. But here, on Tressa 7, at last I learned to be something more: a partner, a defender, a dreamer of a brighter tomorrow. And, in the end, that made all the difference. Epilogue: A happy dawn morning on Tressa 7 broke with a gentle breeze that carried a hint of the desert's scorched fragrance. I stepped outside into the crisp air, feeling the grains of red sand shift beneath my boots. The settlement was stirring, voices drifting from the marketplace, where new stalls sold trinkets, foodstuffs, and local crafts. Somewhere in the distance, a group of children, human, Saran, and other outcasts played a game that involved leaping over barrels, their laughter singing through the dawn. Standing on the threshold of our dwelling, I watched Niora emerge. She paused to tilt her head at the sky, ears perking at the muted roar of a cargo ship lifting off from the starport. A satisfied half-smile formed on her muzzle. Much had changed since the early days of distrust and fear. That starport, once a ramshackle site, now functioned as a modest hub that respected Saran territory. The new accord ensured fair dealings, whether in commerce or resource stewardship. A cluster of clan warriors ambled past, exchanging friendly nods with me, where once there had been animosity or, at best, indifferent tolerance. Now there was respect, a sense of shared experiences that had tempered old prejudices. The barkeep, sporting a bandaged arm from a recent scuffle with a rowdy traveler, strolled by as well, tipping his cap in greeting. He mouthed, "Beer later," and I grinned. "Some things never change. You seem thoughtful," Niora said softly, coming to rest at my side. Her hand, clawed but graceful, slipped into mine. "I was just remembering," I replied, turning to her. "Back when the Fringe was only a dusty refuge for people like me, who had nowhere else to run. Seems it's become something more, hasn't it?" "It has," she agreed, her golden eyes reflecting the rising sun. "Now it's home to dreamers and fighters, both Saran and off-worlders, unafraid to stand together." Her words filled me with a quiet warmth. The battles we had endured, the sacrifices made, the scars that still ached, none were in vain. We had forged bonds strong enough to withstand the howling desert winds, and in that forging, We had discovered our own capacity for hope, arm in arm. We walked down the settlement's main thoroughfare. The day awaited, full of tasks helping Garth with local security, advising newly arrived colonists on how to respect Saran boundaries, and maybe enjoying a home-cooked meal with the barkeep at his refurbished tavern. Yet, overshadowing all these mundane errands, there was the promise of a life shared, no longer alone, no longer haunted by old regrets. Niora squeezed my hand gently, and I returned the gesture, feeling my heart steady and warm. Far in the distance, Tressa's twin moons had faded into the sky's brightening blue, but their memory lingered in the hearts of those who believed in unity. There, in the hush of a desert morning, among the dust and the rising sun, our story continued. And though the world remained vast and uncertain, we had chosen love and courage over fear. Thus, we strode onward, hand in hand, as Tressa 7 welcomed a new dawn, a dawn of acceptance, resilience, and the boundless possibilities of a shared future.